Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming here. For several weeks, I was very happy to come back to Kiev again. For me, this is a great pleasure to present my play Hotel Europe to people from Maidan. And I think that today this is a big honor for me. And also this day is a very sad day, because this is a tragical day, because while we are speaking, thousands of the soldiers of Ukraine are being evacuated from Debaltseve. These are not the soldiers who have been defeated. These are heroic soldiers. They showed in Debaltseve the resistance, which was very strong and heroic. They deserve for recognition by their own country and the admiration of the whole world. Even though they have lost this battle, and this is much more sorrowful for me. And I know this is the same for all Ukrainians. These days in February, 18th of February, was already the day of mourning for Ukraine. And this year, again, this is the same. A year ago, on the 18th of February, the massacre of Maidan started. And during the 18th till the 20th of February, when the law enforcement bodies of Yanukovych were killing the Heavenly Hundred. And this was already the day of mourning. And this is a new day of big sorrow. And I kneel down before those who were killed in Debaltseve, and I would like to welcome the courage of the heroes of Debaltseve. And I would like to say that they deserve again the admiration and respect from the whole world. And within this context, I will be representing in 3 days the theatrical play Hotel Europe. Within this context, I wrote this play a year ago during the events in Maidan. This was the text which marked the revolution of Maidan. And I hope that you will find in the text inspiration of Maidan. And you will all find anxiety which was present at Maidan in those days, and that is what you were surviving. And also, this was the concern and anxiety that I was sharing with you. This is the text which I will be presenting and which will be played in the National Opera of Kiev, which is called Hotel Europe. This text is about Europe, dedicated to the values of Europe, and also to how Europe is betraying its own values. And they like were betraying the values in Sarajevo 20 years ago. I'm afraid that we will see the same betrayal of values by Europe and Kiev. I wish, I'm afraid of that, because the game is not over. The defeat of Debaltseva is just one battle in the battle. It's not the whole war. Ukraine lost one battle, but it hasn't lost the war. Ukraine has entered the war of resistance, and I really know what I say when I say resistance, because Ukraine is faced by the enemy, which takes back the sad heritage of European fascism. The Putinism is fascism. Europe has to support Ukraine if it wants to stay loyal to its anti-fascist memory. And we all expect, I expect that I will see you at my play tonight, which will be also presented in the National Kiev Opera, and that is what I will be talking about today. And now I'm ready to answer your questions. Your questions, please. Good afternoon. Thank you for coming. We would like to ask you, how did the French perceive, Europeans perceive your play when you were playing it at home? I have presented it in Sarajevo. Then I presented it in the Theater Fenicia of Venice. Then I presented it in Odessa. And after that, I will present it in Paris. Paris is just the episode and the whole text. How to answer your question? The friends of Putin in France didn't perceive well the text. Friends of Europe, friends of democracy of Ukraine well received the text. And in the internet there's a website, please visit it. And it is dedicated to this play, Hotel Europe. And it has all the articles of mass media dedicated to this play. And you will see that the consultations of the society, seeing this site will be very, very interesting. The line of separation is the line of Putin. those who are extreme left and extreme right, Putinists, their attitude was very hostile to the text. But those who know that the battle going on in Ukraine is the battle for Europe perceived very well the text. And again, I call upon you, please look at this website. Everything is very well presented there. Are there more friends of Ukraine or friends of Putin? Those who are for the play, there are more of them than those who are against. Yes, much more of them, those who are supporters of the play. And again, this is the reflection of the attitude of French audience to Ukraine. Because in France, the situation is quite clear. We have some of the extremist right sector, which are called National Front. And they are a very powerful force, maybe about 30% of all the voters. And this is the party financed by Putin. They are supported by Putin. And this is the party which supports Putin. But if we exclude that, the rest of the public opinion is mostly favorable towards Maidan. And this is the people of France.
On a voulu prouver qu'un cessez-le-feu était possible, quitte à fermer les yeux sur ce qui se passait à Balsévé.
On a voulu montrer que quoi, pardon,
qu'un cessez-le-feu était possible, en se disant on va fermer les yeux sur des Balsévé, et puis attendre en espérant que ça se calme.
Do you believe that the agreements which were signed were they like closing of the eyes of Europeans at what was happening around Debaltseva? As far as I know, the eyes are not closed to Debaltseva. The issue of Debaltseva is questionable, and it was discussed for 8 hours in Minsk. And 8 hours of very, very difficult negotiations. And they were met by unsurroundable persistency of Putin. I believe that based on that, Monsieur Hollande, Madame Merkel, and Mr. Poroshenko managed to save what they could save. Basically, that means that they won some time, and they won the time and to win some time. Taking into account the correlation of forces was very important, and it was important to achieve that. And if you ask me what I think about the Minsk compromise, I will tell you that I believe that the President Poroshenko, I think just the same as Poroshenko. I don't think well about this agreement. That was a bad agreement. Putin practically did not compromise anything. He did not make a single compromise. The only thing that Ukraine received is again to have some interval, but we hope that the time that Ukraine gained, the time that Ukraine received will be used to organize the resistance. Thank you. Any other questions, colleagues? Good afternoon.
Cette pièce a été vue à Paris par le chef de l'État, François Hollande, par le Premier ministre Valls, mais également par un ancien président de la République qui s'appelle Nicolas Sarkozy. Il me semble qu'il n'a peut-être pas tout à fait compris le message de cette pièce.
I know that in Paris this play was watched by the head of the state, the prime minister, and also one of the former leaders of the state, Nicolas Sarkozy, but I believe he failed to understand the message of this text. That seems to be very obvious to me, because the President Sarkozy has recently made a declaration, a statement that justifies Putin's policy in Donbass. He believes that this is done to protect the Russian language minority in Donbass. And he was comparing the east of Ukraine and Kosovo. And the President Sarkozy said the following. The ideas in accordance with which will allow to separate Kosovo from Serbia have to prevail today when we see the desire of Donbass to get separated from Ukraine. The President Sarkozy does not understand that Ukraine is not Serbia. There is the absolute right of people to get separated from totalitarian state. The totalitarian threat, when the totalitarian state threats the population and kills the population like it was in Kosovo, Serbia was the dictatorship, the totalitarian state. It was the dictatorship. And in Kosovo, they were killing people. Ukraine is democratic state. And there are no citizens in Donbass, in Lugansk, in Donetsk, in Kramatorsk who may say that they are oppressed or they are killed because they are Russian-speaking population. This doesn't make any sense. Donbass is not the Kosovo. Ukraine is not Serbia. And that is what Hotel Europe says. This is the vicious thinking is present in the monologue of the pièce, of the play.
D'entrer en guerre frontale contre la Russie ou de fournir des armements
You have just mentioned that Europe is losing its values, is betraying the values in Ukraine. What does it mean? Does it mean that European states do not sufficiently protect the values in Ukraine? Does it mean that they have to start the war with Russia, that they have to arm Ukraine, and they have to introduce more sanctions? What's your suggestion? I believe that the reaction of Europe is late and insufficient. It's late. I am remember immediately the sad and glorious days of Maidan. Ukrainians have always been waiting for a long time for the support of Europe. It was dispersed because not all the Europe was supporting equally Ukraine. There are the states of Europe which understand what is the scale of the threat. They I think about Czech Republic, France, and Poland. I am not inclined to chauvinism, but I have to say that within these 12 months that passed, I can tell you that I was telling to myself, thank God there is France. France is a leader in this mobilization of Europe. But leader is means that there are countries which are lagging behind. There are countries that think that they're thinking about conducting business with Putin as usually. And that doesn't allow us to talk about one strong and joint way, common way. And in the end, I believe that the reaction of Europe is not adequate, not sufficient, because in the sphere of sanctions we could go further. And you are asking the question about armaments, and I will answer. There's nothing worse than providing armaments, with the exception of leaving people in face of the enemy with the weapons, especially when the people are left one-to-one with the enemy, who is much better armed. This is the situation that we see in Bosnia and Herzegovina now. When 20 years ago, and it was awful to arm Bosnia, but it was even more awful to leave Bosnia in front of the enemy, which was much more armed than them. And this is the same here. I was in Kramatorsk together with the President Poroshenko, and I I stopped at the headquarters of armed forces of Ukraine near Kramatorsk. I was asking the officers, the military people, those who are in the situation which is intolerable.
D'un côté, des voyous séparatistes qui reçoivent des armes en veux-tu, en voilà de leur maître Poutine.
On the one hand, there are bandits and separatists who receive weapons from everywhere and from Putin, and the front line is the borderline is with holes. There are no observers that would stop movement of weapons, and on the other hand, the Ukrainian army, which is has, depending on the better or worse armaments in the battalion, have ammunition enough for 2 to 3 weeks. They have the reserves of ammunition for 2 to 5 weeks. There are no opportunities to replenish this reserve. And based on that, there are no 2 solutions. There's only one solution, one which is better than another one. The best solution is would be not to allow Putin, to stop Putin supplying weapons to separatists. But that is impossible. If we cannot do it, if we do not have will to do that, or if we are not united enough to do that, then we have to agree to provide Ukraine armaments. And the country which will not want or will not be able to provide armaments to Ukraine at least what they can do is not to convince others not to do that, those who can do it. And you know what I mean, what I will tell you. Non-providing assistance to people who are under threat. The situation in Debaltseva is intolerable. Several hundreds of soldiers, or several 5, 6, or 7,000 of military and peaceful citizens who were being shelled dead from the morning till evening for many, many days without any capacity to reply is absolutely intolerable. And it is so that today you had to retreat your troops and what is intolerable is the inequality in force, and also you cannot agree to tying up hands of Poroshenko but leaving the field for manure for Putin. And of course the politics and war act according to certain law. The best way to stop the war is to balance the antagonists. And this is an awful law, but it's a true law.
L'équilibre de la terreur ou l'équilibre de la violence, c'est une des manières.
The balance between of violence, the balance of forces is the only way to restore peace. And I believe that if Poroshenko's army is better armed, then there would be less cruelty in Donbass, and the war has been finished long time ago. And that is why, because Ukrainian army is weak, the Russian army allows itself to do whatever they want.
On a les moyens et la volonté de stopper Poutine, ou bien on rééquilibre les forces.
So there are two ways out. Either we have will and we have means to stop Putin, or we have to balance forces.
Si un jour l'intelligence est vraiment
écouté par les décideurs, alors quels sont les moyens possibles pour contrôler la frontière? Effectivement, quelle pourrait être la carte, le chemin pour y parvenir? La seconde question, il est clair que les sanctions sont insuffisantes. Couper SWIFT et beaucoup d'autres choses plusieurs fois évoquées est nécessaire, imminent face au fait que le cessez-le-feu n'était pas respecté, que Minsk 2 était violé. Alors, quelles sont les étapes maintenant à suivre pour ne pas trop traîner avec les sanctions réelles? Merci.
Two questions. First, on restoring the control over the border, what is the best way to ensure that? And the second question, if Minsk 2 is not efficient, what sanctions could be imposed and how much time is needed for that? How to do so that we move to specific actions as fast as possible to disconnect from SWIFT system. Of course, there should be such a roadmap as strengthening the sanctions and to more isolate Russia at international arena. Russia is complaining that they are isolated, but that is the farce. Russia, and that's good. Russia, like the Soviet Union, was getting, after the disintegration of the Soviet Union, Russia was very well received. It was received as a good player in the European community. Europe and the United States during 20 years have always been making favorable gestures towards Russia, and I repeat, that was normal. The people of Russia are great people, and Russia is a natural partner for Europe. And also, it was coming out of this totalitarian night, Soviet night. And it was very just that the partnership agreement between Russia and NATO was signed, and it was just to include them into G8. And it was correct to make, when they were demanding that certain types of armaments were not deployed near its border, and Europe was agreeing to that. That was normal. And Europe and the United States were multiplying the gestures of support to Russia in times of Yeltsin and then Putin as well. And the topic of humiliation of Russia is a fable, and the topic of isolation of Russia is farce. But today, the situation has changed. And now, for the first time, we have to isolate Putin's regime. Because the violence at the border, the violation of unilateral violation of different international agreements, and also they took this topic of nationalism, of language nationalism, which is awful topic in Europe. This is all very serious, and because of you, and this way, not just the threat is directed not just towards Ukraine, but to the whole of Europe. And if Europe doesn't want to be just a hotel, if it doesn't want to be a temporary hostage where different interests are combined, we need to provide a very quick political response to everything that's happening. And this is the attitude of France, and this is the attitude of Czechs, Polish, the representatives of Baltic states, and this feeling has to be shared by all European Union people, but we need to act quickly, because what is happening in the Baltsova right now, this is absolutely astounding. The ink on Minsk agreements has not dried up, and they started shellings. They started killing the civilians, and this is just smashing Europe's face. And if Europe forgives that, if Europe agrees and does not react to the Baltsova, it will lose any moral authority for a long time and any claims to any leadership of any nature. Any other questions? They have to observe the borders. Or the representatives of OSCE have to do that, or another format is to be found. Because maybe strong European countries have to pay more attention to the control over the border. They have to pay more attention to controlling the border. And I don't know. I know that there are problems with this idea in Germany, and this could be understood, but nevertheless, and the time is going on. The epoch has changed. The fascism is not like it was in the past.
Il est ce qu'il était, les acteurs ont changé.
It is the same, but the actors are different.
Змінилися діючі особи.
Et il faut peut-être imaginer
And maybe
de cette frontière.
we can imagine that maybe we need to consider the possibility to ensure the control over the border by a specially created European force.
Comprendre ces
And
réticences face à telle ou telle demande de l'Ukraine.
as to Germany, we can understand a certain reservation as to different requests made by Ukraine, but we need that Germany also understands that they are responsible, especially responsible for Ukraine.
S'il y a bien un pays en Europe
Because this is the country in Europe which probably has the most historic responsibility towards Europe.
il y a une dette morale
And there is the moral debt of Germany, and they have to execute this moral debt.
Які вона повинна виконати, віддати.
La Russie a une dette morale
And Russia also has a moral debt, a moral duty,
Росія так само має величезний моральний
huge moral duty in respect to Ukraine in the result of the starvation, and Germany because of the Babi Yar. Two countries have this duty, Russia and Germany, who have this big debt here.
Німеччини і Росії.
Any other questions? Thank you, Monsieur Lévy, for what you are doing for your support to Ukraine.